Welcome to another of the Heart of Rural America podcast, the show where we highlight great people I get to meet along the dusty trail in my travels. Today's guest is a really interesting one. I think you're going to really enjoy our conversation. John Bolin, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Amanda. It's great to be here on your new podcast. It's great what you're doing.
Well, thank you. And we're matching in denim today, which is
Yeah.
fun. But I got to say, when we first met, you looked a little different. We met in 2019 at a movie premiere in Black Hills of South Dakota. The Stand of Paxton County was the movie. And when I originally met you that day, you had a full-fledged long beard. And by the end, at the movie premiere, you were like clean and polished. So I guess maybe let's talk a little bit about your life as the bearded man. What were you doing at that chapter of your life?
Well, my background was, in law enforcement. Most of my adult life, I was in law enforcement in some capacity, and I always had when I was in uniform. And probably about half of my career, I was a uniformed officer, and the other half I was in plain clothes or undercover. So no uniforms. Sorry, there's flies buzzing around here. If you see me waving my hand, I'm not trying to get help. I'm swatting flies.
You might need help by the end of this. Who
knows? I might. But anyway, so I got into this thing of, after having so many years of being clean shaven when in uniform, I just decided I wasn't going to shave anymore. And it's really interesting that you mentioned that, because I was really proud of that beard. That it takes a while for a man to grow a beard that looks that good.
Well, that's why it was shocking that, like, by the end of the day, it was gone.
Yeah. So what happened was, I do once in a while, because we won't get into my age, but a beard will age me, because my beard comes in completely gray, and sometimes I'll get up and look in the mirror and wonder who the old man in the mirror is, and I'll just shave it off. And that was being out there in South Dakota for that premiere and stuff. I thought, well, I had been told that I might have the opportunity to speak to the group there, and I thought that I should look presentable. So I shaved it off. And it wasn't an undercover thing, where I was trying to change my identity this time.
I'm so gullible. I literally thought this whole time you had something going on in the day, you cleaned the case, and then you came to the movie premiere. But no, that wasn't the case.
That not this time, not on that trip. No.
You're probably busted. You probably told me that night, and I'm so gullible. I was probably like, "Wow, he busted a drug deal in the afternoon in time for the movie premiere."
That's funny. That's funny. No, those days were far behind me by then.
Okay, so you were undercover.
Yeah.
Busting drug cartel. It's just interesting to me. Tell me what you did.
Yeah. No, I did drug interdiction for a couple of years when I was on a city police department here in Indiana. And then that experience really is what opened the door to a state level job that was strictly undercover. And there was 16 of us that covered the entire state. So I was very fortunate to get one of those 16 positions for the entire state of Indiana. And I covered the central Indiana area, Indianapolis and surrounding counties. And that was illegal gambling was really the main thing that we investigated there. The drug investigations were, if we did come across some type of illegal drug activity during the course of our investigations into the illegal gambling, we would refer that to the state police or someone that was doing that specifically. But what we mainly focused on was RICO, which has been in the news a lot lately. It's racketeer influenced corrupt organizations, and gambling is one of the predicate crimes that falls under the category of RICO. So I did those type of investigations, and uh, also during that period of time, that 7 to 8 year period of time that I worked for the state in that capacity, I was also tasked to the United United States Marshals Service as a fugitive, um, what they call it, a fugitive task force officer. So I was sworn in as a U.S. Marshal and had the same power and authority as any other U.S. Marshal, but I was still technically a state employee. It's kind of hard to explain, but so I also hunted high level fugitives undercover.
And so you would just go and be amongst them and be one of them, kind of? Is that basically how
Uh,
it
in some cases, we would have to try to get close to some of the people that we knew could possibly be in contact with the fugitive. So yeah, we would go into some pretty shady places sometimes in that capacity.
So I have a wide audience of all walks of life that listen to this, but I feel like there's lessons to be learned from an undercover criminal investigator. Like how did you learn to read people and kind of keep a poker face and to I guess what advice would you how can you apply this to real life? Because I'm certain you do it still today.
Yeah. Um, the most important thing is training
Mhm.
and preparation. You you have to be um, constantly aware of your surroundings, constantly aware of the individuals that you're investigating or that you're hunting for if they're fugitive.
Mhm.
Um, it's just a matter of knowing your enemy, really, and whatever that takes. And it take a lot of times I would investigate someone, every single aspect of that person about their life, if they were a criminal target, if I
Mhm.
had a reason to believe that they had committed a crime and it would justify me to open up an investigation, then I would learn. And I'm not unique in this. A lot of good investigators conduct themselves this way, but I do feel like maybe I did dig a little deeper sometimes than others would. But I would know everything about them that I possibly could learn before I ever had any kind of contact with them. And that was just mainly for officer safety, but it was also for being able to question them, to interview or interrogate an individual after making contact and know enough about them for them to understand that you're serious, that you do, you know what you're talking about. And
So I feel like in life or politics or business, yeah, that applies. Doing your research, understanding who you're working for, friend and foe.
yeah,
And maybe I always think if you lose the emotional game, you've lost the debate or you've lost the battle. And like conversations with trolls on the internet or dealing with
yeah.
political things. So it's you're very like you can keep it in check. And I admire that. You're hard to read. But I think that's a good trait for just life in general. That
Yeah, yeah, it is. Thank you for that. That's a compliment, and it's a double edged sword, really, to be perfectly honest with you, because being hyper vigilant all of the time becomes exhausting. Uh,
you
but
keep all those very quick comments to yourself in that head of yours. And but I'm sure, like I'm like, if I hung out with you long enough, I'm admitting to a murder here in like 30 seconds. I gotta fill the silence with something. He's just staring you down.
well,
Guilty.
uh, but it's interesting because what I have noticed, especially post COVID,
Hmm.
is that a lot of people in this country are hyper vigilant now, and unfortunately, um, our enemy, we're hyper vigilant against those that should be protecting us,
Yeah.
against those that are elected by us, and some that are in positions that didn't necessarily get elected.
Hmm.
Um, but we have become hyper vigilant, and we have become cautious and untrustworthy, I guess, or not untrustworthy, but untrusting
Mhm.
of those people that we used to think had our best interest in mind.
I
And
agree. It is a double-edged sword.
mhm,
It's one of those things. I think it's amazing that citizens are more aware and the curtain's been lifted so that they can see the corruption
yeah,
and all of the things that our elected officials are doing, the size of our federal government now, and just the power that they think
hmm,
they can seize. Heck, I saw the New Mexico governor the other day is using emergency powers to take away gun rights,
right,
but the down part of that is when you are diligent and you do pay attention. What I've learned post COVID is I paid such close attention. It can eat you up inside too,
yeah,
and
yeah,
it can also steal your joy. And so what I found was I was smiling a lot less. I was a lot less optimistic as I used to be. And
hmm,
what I've decided in 2023 is I'm no longer going to let evil people or corrupt people steal my joy or take away my hope.
absolutely,
You know,
absolutely,
my faith is in Jesus, and if I
hmm,
can slow down the powers that be from doing corrupt, evil things here on this earth, I'm going to try my hardest in my sphere of influence. But at the same time, I have to find things to be hopeful about. Otherwise, it can just consume you. Do you feel the same way?
I do, and I totally agree with what you just described. It was a roller coaster of emotion, and going through all of the emotion of uncertainty, fear, even hate. Hate's a very, very powerful word that I don't use loosely because I don't feel like honestly that I've ever hated anyone. Even I've had individuals that tried to harm me in law enforcement, individuals that I had to fight for my life with, and I don't hate them.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't hate them the moment the fight was over. I didn't have hate in my heart toward them. But all of the emotion and who to blame. It's like, who do we blame for? It seems like there's some type of healing that comes with understanding who our enemy really is. And let me silence my phone. I'm sorry. And when COVID hit, it didn't take me very long to see it as very possibly a biological attack from one of our enemies. And um, then what was even more troubling, honestly, than that was the way that it was used, in my opinion, as a test to see how compliant the people would be in this country and in other countries, and how readily we would say, "Oh yes, absolutely, we trust you, we trust our government, and oh yes, we'll do whatever you say."
Mm-hmm.
And there was a clear division. I lost, not unlike you and millions of other folks, we lost friends
Mm-hmm.
that we would never have imagined we would have lost when we disagreed with the vaccinations and the COVID mandates and everything else. And I do believe that then it was used as a test, and now it would be easy if I was at a level where I was going to investigate and see who the resistance might be every time I try to gain more control over the people. Then you just have to look at who resisted the COVID mandates and who resisted the vaccinations, and there you have a pretty clear line, a pretty good idea.
Oh, John Bolin, we are totally on a list.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
I'm proud to be on the list. But
Yeah,
that's the thing. Go ahead and paint. I can just imagine some people listening to this and being like, who are these alt-right extremists and what are they even
right.
talking about? And I think
Hmm.
the biggest misunderstanding is I never wished anyone ill will. I never wanted anyone to get sick with COVID. I
Right.
didn't I had family members impacted by it. I lost
Hmm.
a loved one from COVID. Like there was a lot going on in this country, but like you said, it was weaponized against the citizens.
Right. Right.
Convince people that you were an essential worker. Well, every single person that brings in a paycheck for their family is essential.
Mm-hmm.
Don't tell me that
Absolutely.
my ability to make a living and take care of my family is not important. And the fact that it divided people, where it made people clean versus unclean, like that's
Yeah.
Nazi
Yeah.
Germany stuff. Like
Right.
I literally had family members tell me I could go die in the parking lot at the hospital because they wouldn't let me in if I got sick. It was
Yeah.
that kind of just crazy division. And at the end of the day, I think the people that resisted it had nothing to do with COVID. In fact, I know this for a fact. It had nothing to do with COVID, but it had everything to do with we don't sacrifice and give up our liberties and our freedoms and our ability to make decisions for our own bodies, because I am a
Mhm.
sovereign person. I'm not
Yeah.
controlled or owned by the state. And I'm not willing to give that up for myself or my neighbors who maybe disagree with
Absolutely.
me. Like I was fighting for the people that hated me.
Yeah.
They may not understand that they were trading freedom for security, but security is not what you want when you have a government that so clearly despises you.
That's right. That's right. That's right. And I mean, this all started well, it probably started a lot earlier than what I'm going to mention, but one of the time that I really noticed it, and I even mentioned it, was after 9/11. And here we are not too far after the anniversary of 9/11. Um, but I remember when that happened, and being in and from the law enforcement world most of my life, when they were proposing the creation of the Department of Homeland Security, and the justification behind it was we needed better communication between all levels of law enforcement, from federal to state to county to city, and it wanted to make that communication easier, take down those barriers. And um, I was skeptical then. And I mentioned to several people, this is the beginning of the creation of a United States police force.
Yeah.
And I still believe that. Um, now that created all of the task forces, that like the one that I was a member of, the U.S. Marshals Fugitive Task Force. That's when all of that came about. And the because they understood the importance of local people.
Mm-hmm.
So you take a federal agency um, that's having trouble communicating at the county level, then how do you remedy that? You create these task forces and you recruit local people, and you swear them in as U.S. Marshals, or you swear them in as FBI agents. And the FBI has the equivalent of the U.S. Marshals Fugitive Task Force is the Joint Terrorism Task Force, and that's the FBI. There's a lot of local and state level police officers that are tasked to the FBI for that purpose. Kind of rambling now, but
Well, and to
um,
that point, the American people consented to a surveillance
mhm.
state,
Right,
essentially.
for
That way
safety. That's thank you. That's where I was going with that. Sometimes you gotta help us old minds keep us on track.
Well, I think about it every time I fly now.
Yeah.
And I think I remember I was in eighth grade English class when we watched that on TV. And much like COVID, like that was a constant news cycle where, yes, it was a horrible, horrific thing that happened, but it was how it was weaponized to instill
Hmm.
fear
Hmm.
in the American people. Yes, that incident created patriotism, much like we had never seen in
Yes.
my lifetime. But
Yeah.
the flip side of that was that patriotism was fueled by absolute fear, which
Hmm.
divided us, which propelled us to willingly give up our freedoms.
Right.
And so
Absolutely. You nailed it. You nailed it.
and
And
so I think the lesson moving forward, we're going into an election year. I
mhm.
have no doubt that there is going to be shenanigans run amok in the
Yep.
next game.
Yep.
I'm just cringing. I just basically I'm like, I'm not in the mood for these games because I've
Right.
seen them all from both sides, and I'm just like, I
Yep.
don't want to play your games anymore. I just don't. But I
Absolutely.
think the lesson is, and you said it here, with getting to the local, infiltrating the local, and weaponizing the local. That's also the solution. And that
Hmm.
the buck right now, we're kind of in a fight between federal government and states' rights, and then states versus the county and the local. And every single person listening to this podcast can get on the school board, can go to a county commissioner meeting, can write letters to the editor. They can use their social media platforms to spread awareness or talk about issues. They can go testify in front of their state legislators. There are things that we, the people, the little people in the heart of rural America, can do to not be helpless. You know,
Right.
that Oliver Anthony song that came out, A Rich Man North of Richmond, it
Hmm.
went crazy. People resonated with it. I loved it. I heard it and I was like, man, this is how I feel a lot of days. Except that song was missing one thing, which was a call to action, a
Right.
solution. I'm not going to sit at home and cry about how corrupt the system is. I'm not going to just lay down and die and just be like, well, that's how it goes. But I'm going to realize that myself, my family, my little area in South Dakota, my community, I can impact things. I can make a difference one way or
Hmm.
another. And so can every single person listening here. I
Right.
don't even care what's going on in DC if we're not taking care of what's happening at home and in our backyards first. We've got
You're
to clean up
absolutely
our
right.
home. That was a soapbox for the day.
Yep. No, you're absolutely right. And that was, and you and I kind of we text a little bit back and forth about this topic already, but I want to reiterate that, with all of the negative stuff that came out of COVID, I do believe, and you were talking about, it's hard not to be pessimistic, it's hard not to be negative, it's hard not to be constantly exhausted from the hypervigilance, but there is hope.
Mhm.
And it happened. Um, the same way it always does in this country. And you can go all the way back to the founding in this country, but it happened. We the people, took something negative and fearful and we turned it around.
Mhm.
And it didn't take very long at all when this stuff hit, when people realized that, what, we are possibly going to be locked down.
Mhm.
There's going to be supply chain problems. And people witnessed it firsthand.
Yep.
And people started to panic a little bit, but it didn't take long for that panic to convert into preparation.
Yep.
And people started finding ways. I was excited to see so many people um, doing the little homestead stuff
Yeah.
that, call it whatever you want. It was just people decided, what, I need to go back and relearn um, how to grow my own food. I need to relearn how to process beef and pork, and I need to get my hunting gear out and polished up, and relearn how to go out and hunt and
Yep.
be self sufficient. And um, there's an absolute wave of that across this country, and it's continuing. Um, and that's exciting.
Mhm.
That's exciting because we're returning back what COVID did, and not COVID, but what the government's response to COVID did
Yep.
to the people of this country is it awakened that sleeping giant.
And
It,
there's a lot of mockery, I feel, for kind of in agriculture of the people that are going and getting a few acres and growing a garden. I know that's kind of your peace and solitude now, is gardening
mhm,
and focusing on just being self-sufficient. I think it's super
mhm,
inspirational, but I love encouraging people to step back into the space of agriculture because
right,
number one, it gives you a greater appreciation of where your food comes from and how hard it is to grow food. Number
absolutely.
two, anytime
Hmm.
a family is saying, we're going to spend more time outside and I'm going to teach my kids how to grow something or to shoot a gun or to do these things.
Hmm.
For me, even though I've lived on a cattle ranch my whole life, it's like if things got crazy, come out here. Like good
Hmm.
luck to you. We're always ready. It's just how we're designed. But
Right.
to me, it's made me reprioritize what I do with my kids, and that
Right.
I feel like my generation, my parents were. It was just the push. You had to stack the resume with as many sports and activities and trophies and things you could win. And now
Mm-hmm.
we have like a society of idiots that can't do anything, but they have
Right.
all the trophies on the shelf. And to me now,
Hmm.
I'm like, wait, there's so many lessons I can teach my kids for free on the farm that they can learn from mom and dad. Never mind the fact that the divorce rate is over 50%, that kids aren't spending time with their parents, that everybody's stressed out and overbooked and all those things. But the solution to that is really simple to me. It's dinners together at the dining room table with the
Hmm.
kids and mom and
Yep.
dad, taking them outside, teaching them life skills. And I think I'm on this soapbox right now because I just had someone on the internet ask me, like, why are your kids working? I showed a video of them helping on the farm, and I'm just like, we are just in such different worlds. If I have to
Yes.
explain this to you, I can't even have the conversation. Like, we just
Yeah.
can't. There's no way we're gonna connect. So I'm just gonna chuckle and keep doing what I'm doing. So
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
but John, I did not anticipate this is the direction we were going to go today. And so I promised you 30 minutes. I feel like I'm saying this a lot on these shows because I have such great guests that come on. But what I really wanted to talk to you today was about your second chapter of life. Do we have time? Can we talk about that, or do we need to make a part two?
How much time do we have?
I mean, let's just roll with it and see what.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Well, just
All right.
you have the power of editing and all of
Yeah,
that.
there we go. There we go.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, your next chapter of life, you get out of the undercover world, out of your career in law enforcement. Where do you go next?
Well, yeah, and I have to do a little bit of the backstory on that to connect the dots. But during my time working for the state of Indiana, investigating illegal gambling and any crime that any criminal enterprise that survived off of illegal gambling is the way I like to word it. The director was contacted by the Humane Society of the United States, also known as HSUS, and was asked if our department would be willing to investigate some animal fighting cases. And they tied together the gambling nexus with the animal fighting, which is true. Animal fighting wouldn't exist if it wasn't for the gambling and the money that can be made on it. So the information that they had was that there was an individual in Indiana that was an international cockfighting person. He was raising cockfighting roosters for international shipping. He was shipping them to the Philippines, to be specific. And he had property in the Philippines and family in the Philippines. But the Humane Society of the United States got a hold of that information and then recruited us to investigate that, us being the Indiana Gaming Commission. And that particular case exposed, not until it went to trial, these flies are terrible.
They're crashing the show.
Yeah, they're getting right on the camera. They want to be on camera. I guess we shouldn't leave the door open so much here in the country.
Story of my life with 4 children. I'm like, we
Yeah.
don't live in a barn. Shut the door. We live
Right.
very close to being in a barn, but for some reason, I don't want the flies moving in with me.
Yeah, same here. But anyway, even with that distraction there, so anyway, to fast forward, there's more, and I can come back on sometime and talk about more in depth a lot of the different parts of how I ended up being involved in that world. But anyway, the HSUS was one of the national animal rights organizations that was looking at this stuff, and then there was this is getting funny.
No, animal rights activists are the flies.
Well, that's true.
They just never stop. Here they are over here too.
There they are. They're sending their little fly drones in here.
Yeah.
So we found out during the trial of that case that, to make a long story short, I was able to infiltrate that individual, and I was able to obtain enough information that we got a search warrant, and we went and took down the operation. And the HSUS was the expert witness on the case, and I didn't know anything about the world of animal fighting prior to that. So I learned on the fly, no pun intended, from HSUS how to investigate those things. That case ended up going to trial, and during the trial, the defense attorney brought information forward that the person that was advising me had actually been a member of the ALF in the past. The ALF is the Animal Liberation Front. The Animal Liberation Front has been listed by the FBI as a domestic terrorist organization. So that was embarrassing that we had been working with this person all this time, and we were supposed to be the law enforcement experts, and um, basically this individual infiltrated us as a police department to get us to go investigate something. Now, that being said, it was a crime. It had a gambling nexus, and so justifiably it should have been investigated. But uh, the involvement of this animal rights group shouldn't have happened.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, should have been vetted better. So fast forward, we quit working with the HSUS, but we were really kind of getting involved in a lot of animal fighting cases by then, including dog fighting cases. And so we began working with the ASPCA, the American Society for Prevention of Cruelty to Animals.
Mm-hmm.
And it seemed like that their group wasn't quite as radical as the HSUS folks. And I decided, after speaking with a lot of these individuals and talking to them, working with them on a lot of the different animal fighting cases, that I would wrap up my law enforcement career early and go to work for them. And they offered me a lot of money,
Mm-hmm.
and it was good pay. It was excellent benefits. It was a matching 401k savings. Everything that a law enforcement officer would hope to find at the end of his career is
Family
another.
pick up to drive, right? Like all the bells
Yeah.
and whistles.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So my title, I went to work for them. My title was investigator, and they they use a lot of police terminology. They use a lot of stuff that to try to make people believe that they're law enforcement agencies, but they're not. They're nonprofit organizations with zero law enforcement power whatsoever. But they recruit law enforcement. They hired me, um, and my title was Northeast investigator. So I covered the northeast part of the country, Pennsylvania, all the way north to Maine, and down the East Coast, New York, and that area was my area to work. And I also trained law enforcement officers. I trained them using the ASPCA's curriculum, basically, and traveled all over the country training police officers in so-called animal cruelty investigations.
Oh, okay, pause on that.
Yeah.
ASPCA,
Mm-hmm.
the animal rights organization with more money than God, that
Right.
weaponizes that money to take producers off the land and to
Mm-hmm.
strip away our private property rights and our ability to own animals.
Right.
They are training law enforcement.
Oh, absolutely. Training and recruiting law enforcement to come to work for them. Just, that was the case with me. But
Cool.
the HSUS has a law enforcement training division, and they train more police officers throughout the country than the ASPCA does.
I can
Uh,
verify that as fact because HSUS was in Mitchell, South Dakota, doing that exact same thing within the last couple of years.
mm-hmm. Absolutely. They have so I was there for a few years, and I realized throughout my time there that there were a lot of things going on behind closed doors, a lot of things that um, they were portraying themselves as a certain way to the general public. They were talking about how many animals they were helping and rescuing, among a lot of other things that they were doing that from my perspective and my experience was shady and borderline criminal
Mm-hmm.
and violations of people's constitutional rights. And I began to speak up about it. And it came to a point where I realized that they were going to try to find a way to get rid of me. They were going to try to use me as a scapegoat in some capacity. I was wise enough to see that coming because I was resisting them.
Mm-hmm.
And these people have such an elitist mentality. They think that they are smarter than everyone else. They think that they are God's gift to animal life all over the world. They think that they're here. It's really an obsessive, narcissistic, um, borderline psychotic type of mentality that they have. They think that um, they're doing something to save animals that um,
It becomes its own religion in a
It
way.
does. It does. That's exactly what it becomes. And so I resigned in December of 2017. I resigned from that job, and I had no job to go to. Just before Christmas and wintertime in Indiana, and but I had had enough. I was so sick with the contradiction and the hypocrisy and the stuff that I saw going on, and so I resigned, and when I resigned, I asked for an exit interview, and they denied my exit interview. They wouldn't give me an explanation of why they denied my exit interview. I had not had any write ups, any kind of disciplinary action taken against me. Um, so for me to resign and then ask for an exit interview and be denied was just really weird. And so I didn't get my exit interview, and I was going to just move on and with my life. And I started to think, no, there's a reason why I experienced the things I experienced, and I'm going to share this. And the blessing in disguise, as some people will say sometimes, when we think that the world's turned upside down and we don't know what we're going to do, then there's a purpose. God puts us where He wants us when He wants us.
Yep.
And when I started into law enforcement at the age of 19 as a county deputy here in Indiana, I never had any idea whatsoever that I would end up where I am today as a result of my law enforcement experience, which led me to work for the ASPCA, the largest animal rights organization in the country, and that this country boy from Indiana would end up in New York City and uh, working for this kind of an organization. But it was all for a purpose. And so the exit interview is where they have you sign a non-disclosure agreement, basically a gag order. They'll bribe you with a big severance package and say, now sign on the dotted line and keep your mouth shut.
Yep.
You don't talk about what we do or how we do it or anything like that. So I didn't get offered that and didn't sign one. So I was free to speak and share the truth as much as I wanted to. So I set up an undercover account on Twitter and started tweeting stuff out. And I got contacted by a couple of different individuals and ended up being contacted by Trent Luce. And Trent offered to have me on his show, Rural Route Radio. And the first time that I went on his show, we had a discussion obviously beforehand. I told him that I was not going to mention who I worked for because I was terrified that they were going to sue me.
Yeah.
And I had seen how they did those things, how they would tie people up in legal stuff, and there's no way you can fight $1 billion industry when you're just a former cop from Indiana. I mean, I didn't have any.
You've said that they could stop getting donations tomorrow and they could still operate for the next 30 years, correct? Without.
Yeah, it was something like that. But that was when they flew me to New York for my week-long orientation, and I asked one of the other people that was working there, that had been there for a while, that was out there for the training or whatever. I said, this is amazing that how much money these people have and how can they afford to pay all these salaries and the brand new Ford truck that they gave me for equipment, the big trailer that they gave me, and a credit card with a $10,000 a month credit limit to buy the supplies that I needed. And he said, I was told that they have enough money now in savings, and they have money in offshore accounts also. It's been verified. The information's available online. He said, I was told that donations could end today and they could operate just like they are now for 20 or 30 years.
Wow.
I forget what the exact number was, but
describe the building too. So if people aren't familiar, ASPCA is the one with the Sarah McLachlan commercials where the dogs and cats are like crying on the screen.
Oh yeah.
For $19.99 a month, you can save the little kids.
Everything that they do is based on emotion.
Yep.
They want an emotional response from people.
Which it's okay. So that is why this podcast was created, because I tell people all the time, we can't fight these people by just spouting off the research that
Hmm.
we have. We can't,
That's right.
which we are logical people and we have sound science to justify everything that we do. But until people see what our heart is, we're not even playing the same game. I mean,
Right.
they're still not following the rules and codes of ethic of the cowboy, of course, the animal rights activists, but they are
Hmm.
so good at preying on people's emotions. And if they
Absolutely.
only knew the people that they were hurting, which is you and I, which is people in
Hmm.
rural America, it's the
Yep.
only way we can change the course of direction, because these donors are well intentioned people. They have big hearts and they want to help and make a difference.
Hmm.
They've just been conned. They frankly
Yeah.
been fleeced of their money, and it's
Absolutely.
terrifying. It's crazy.
Yeah, and that's a lot of the reason why law enforcement agencies get so caught up in it too, because law enforcement, especially now more than ever. When I started in 1989, there were still people still respected law enforcement,
Mhm.
and I was very fortunate to have mentors when I started that had been there since the 60s and 70s in law enforcement, and you're talking about old school cops there.
Mhm.
Um, but um, yeah, I just got derailed a little bit. But getting back to your original question, um, about what it was like in at the ASPCA. They have their main headquarters in Manhattan. I mean, they literally own like a city block. So I mean, it's you're talking about billions and billions of dollars worth of assets and billions of dollars worth of donations coming into them. The CEO made $1 million last year. Um,
It's it's downright evil. It's crazy. But that brings us to what you're doing now. And I want to wrap in the next 5 minutes here. So I don't want to
yeah,
rush you. You're gonna have to come back, I think.
yeah, that's I understand. Yeah,
So now you are the owner at Area Consulting, correct? So it stands for
um,
Animal Rights Extremist Awareness. Is that what you're
well,
what do you
that was that
okay,
was I did create that LLC,
okay.
and but I scrapped it, and
Okay.
I'll tell you why.
Okay.
It just the more I tried to promote myself as a consultant, the more I felt myself slipping back into something that I didn't want to be a part of.
Okay.
There's so many so-called consultants on both sides of this fight,
Yeah.
and I didn't want to paint myself into a corner.
Yeah.
So I made the decision that I would just dissolve that, and
Okay.
then, after ordering 1,000 business cards, I just threw them in the trash. and,
You know what
and
that's
so
called discernment from the Lord, though. It's
it is,
well,
it
He
is,
directs your path.
yeah. So now I do go out and speak anytime I'm invited. I go speak. I just got back from Pennsylvania. I was invited out to speak for the Pennsylvania Federation of Dog Clubs out there, and there were some individuals there from Pennsylvania state government. There was an individual there from the U.S. Congress, and um, they're all like-minded individuals. But I go out now and I speak about animal rights extremism awareness
Mhm.
from a law enforcement perspective and from an inside perspective. I was at a very high level within the ASPCA,
Mhm.
and I was also, I mean, I drafted their undercover policies and procedures just before they got scrapped. Their policies and procedures got scrapped, and that's something for another time. But that was as a result of me speaking out about it while I still work there. But yeah, so to sum it up, that's what I do now. I feel like it's my duty. I feel like I have an obligation and a duty. Why did I experience the things I experienced? Why did I get inside of that organization and then leave and not have to sign a non-disclosure? Well, it's because I need to share the truth. I need to speak about these individuals and these organizations and how much of a danger that they pose to our freedom. They
Mhm.
pose a serious danger to this country's freedom, to rural Americans' right to raise animals, and the difference between animal welfare and animal rights needs to be clearly drawn. The difference between those two things, and so I work in construction, in the construction industry. That's what I do to make my living. And once in a while, I will go speak for a group and share my experience.
So there are a lot of livestock producers that listen to this show. I guess just to close things out, can you tell the listeners how these animal rights groups are attacking animal agriculture specifically, and maybe give everyone a call to action of what to do to fight back?
Yeah, they're attacking every industry that's animal related, and the problem, a couple of the problems that we have in the animal world, whether it be dog breeders, circuses, rodeos, or cattle producers, pork producers, egg producers. Um, they're attacking all of us at the same time. Hunters, fishermen, trappers, um, anything animal related, even animals being used in the movie industry. They're
Yep.
attacking all of it. So my advice, and really a plea, because I've seen in the past 6 or so years now that I've been doing this, speaking out, I see the division within these industries.
Hmm.
The industries that should be uniting and fighting against these animal rights people still have their own little divisions. And we have to drop our egos. For God's sakes, who's right or who's wrong in the animal industry doesn't really matter right now.
Hmm.
It's our common enemy.
Hmm.
That's what matters. Our common enemy is the animal rights special interest groups, not just the animal rights, but the environmental folks also.
Yep.
They're all working together to
Hmm.
steal our rights and control us. If they can control our food and our ability to raise our own animals, or our ability to hunt and fish, if they can control that and they can make us hungry, then they assume they can control everything about our lives, and
So
that's their goal.
to me, it's all summed up as a private property rights issue, which is
Yeah.
the hill I die on. And I'm glad you mentioned the environmental extremists too. And
Mm-hmm.
it really is he who controls the land controls the food, and who controls the food controls the people. And so the landowners in this country have a really great opportunity to be stewards of the land, but they have a great responsibility to fight for their private property rights. So that's animals, that's land, that's the clothes on your back, the food in your refrigerator.
Absolutely.
Any government, any climate change, tyrannical regulations, any extremist groups that says cows should have citizenry or we shouldn't be able
Mm.
to own dogs or have circuses or rodeos or whatever it might be. It's not that issue. It's the greater issue, which is freedom, liberty, private
That's right.
property rights. And so
That's right. Absolutely.
I guess thank you so much for coming on. I feel like we could do another hour of this, and we're going to have to on the next
Sure.
episode of The Heart of Rural America. So I'm Amanda Radke with John Bolin. We'll see you on the Dusty Trail, John.
Have a good day.